Spring is always a wonderful time. You never know what's coming out. And I find myself today in the middle of this glorious patch of blue and a little pink and of course some green. And I'm here with Matthew hanging out in Cheatham County. Wow, let's start with where we are. This is an old homestead.
Yeah, we're in a Virginia bluebell patch, but it's sort of interesting to think that this area got colonized by people from Virginia and North Carolina. And this is an old area. This is way back in my backyard where there's probably no agriculture history. And people started settling in the early 1800s. And I think partly from cows moving through the woods and deer moving through the woods, the bluebells get established wherever it's moist.
Yes, and we are actually down in the perfect area for these beautiful flowers. We've got, I can tell there's a little bit of water can run through here. We've got a little dappled shade. What else do we need for these lovely things?
Well, they're part of the spring ephemerals, so they come and go really fast, and in about a month you won't see them anymore. But it's nice that they grow so quickly in the spring that these big lung-shaped leaves that are glabrous and waxy can resist any of the spring frosts. And you see the little blue flowers coming out almost like forget-me-nots, and they're just beautiful the way they unfurl and uncurl.
Well, they're absolutely gorgeous flowers, and we're lucky to be out here just as they are blooming, since they're not going to last very long. Now, spring ephemerals, oh my gosh, there's so much to see. And so this is an old place. I know we've got some more old plants, so let's go look at them. Well, I love daffodils because to me they mean, whee, spring's going to be here. And there's a really early one, the tete-a-tete daffodil. So I know that's one of your favorites too.
I like the tete-a-tete because it's as early as those yellow ones that just bloom by the side of the road, and yet it's a modern variety that is a miniature and that has a bunch of pretty attributes. Very yellow, with a slight orange tinge to the corolla, and there's tete boucle, which is double. So that's been evolving. So I've been learning a little bit from the Daffodil Society, but I do recommend their breeding is just amazing. And they're always coming up with new things.
Well, and one of the neat things about the tete-a-tete is that it's somewhat resistant to some of our little critters that are running around in the spring looking for something to eat.
That reminds me, Julie, because we have voles here. So apart from deer, which would be the big problem, and they don't eat daffodils in general because daffodils are toxic to them. But the voles sometimes will slip a bulb into their hives and get rid of them. And so I always have to worry about that. But so far I don't do anything to them, but I know some people in the society, they protect things in baskets. And it's also a good way to keep the clump from dividing so much, like the ones that are behind us. Those have just multiplied, and so you can't tell one individual bulb anymore from another individual bulb after they produced 8 to 12 to 24 different baby bulbs.
Well, and just like old daffodils, is this correct that when they're done blooming, we don't want to cut them down right away, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to cut the stalk, so it's not going to try to produce anything, and we're going to leave the foliage until it naturally dies.
Yeah, and with all of these, I think even as they fade, they tend to lose all their petals, and so you don't have to worry about them. Some, especially the jonquils and the smaller varieties, their corolla and petals actually just fade away, and so you don't even need to pick off the seed heads. In fact, it's sort of nice to have, if you have more than one variety, to cover that seed head, like my friend Becky does, and keep it and see what you get as a plant. Maybe 5 years down the road, it'll flower.
Nice. Well, let's talk about some other varieties now. Well, we have a little bit of a misnomer now to talk about, the wild daffodil, but it's not wild from here. It's just been on your homestead for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
So what does it like about living here? Where does it want to live?
Well, that's what we call the buttercup. And so the traditional buttercup of the South, I think is the daffodil or pseudo narcissus that can just live on its own and multiply, and it stays there for about 50 to 100 years. And since this place is over 100 years old, it's probably around, especially in a sunny location on a hillside that faces south. So they want to face the sun, and they want to come up very early, and so they need that soil temperature to go up and start warming up, and that'll bring them out. And I just spread them out in swaths, and about 3 years down after planting one individual bulb, you get a nice clump. And so the nicest thing is they're not bright colors, they're not big sizes, they're sort of medium in all aspects, but just they work as wild plants almost.
Well, what another beautiful plant that we've had naturalized that isn't causing us a problem, and we can feel free to enjoy it all spring long.
Yeah, I don't think it's invasive, so it's just one of those plants that we can enjoy and call it the buttercup and drive by it and see a patch of yellow.
Now, if you've been in any old neighborhood or on some of the old properties like the one we're at here, then you're likely to see all of this tangle of vine everywhere. And then if you're really lucky and in the right place at the right time in the spring, you'll see it start to bloom.
So we moved to the wisteria, and then within wisteria, we have at least 3 species that are all ornamental and of importance.
All right, well, let's break it down for people because, people were bringing wisteria over a couple hundred years ago, and so we have a lot of it. So let's see here. Let's talk about the one we're seeing up here. It's clearly going to be this beautiful dark blue, purplish color. It's just now starting to bloom. It's going to come out really quickly as the heat hits it in the next couple of days. What kind is this?
So this is pretty. It matches your shirt, and it's basically the classic blue that we see for the Japanese wisteria, which is darker than both the Chinese and the American. It also has the longest of the racemes, being the set of flowers all the way from where your top fingers are down to where this little worm-like structure is opening. And each one of those little knobs is a new flower that's going to come out. And that whole raceme is going to be at least half a foot long, maybe a foot.
Fascinating. Okay, now we have a different wisteria right here. We've got some different colors, and which one is this?
So this one being lighter and a little bit bicolor in that it has a different part of white butterfly, and then followed by these keel flowers that are purpley, and the scent is really beautiful, which is typical of Chinese wisteria. And Chinese wisteria can be distinguished by the way the vines grow compared to Japanese wisteria. Even though they're neighbors, Japan and China, they grow in different directions.
Oh, say more about that. What do you mean they're growing in different directions?
So many plants will do a twine, and especially if they're a vine, they will twine in a way that is called binding. And that binding is where the stem elongates in either a clockwise or a counterclockwise direction. This is also termed right-handedness or left-handedness in plants. And anybody that's grown beans know that this is a characteristic, because if you put the vine up the trellis in the wrong direction, it'll immediately all unwind and fall down at your feet.
Oh, I've had that happen. Okay, let's look at this one. Which one? Okay, we've got a good example here. So which one is this?
So this one is the Chinese wisteria, and it happened to be 2 vines that last season grew together. And you can see that the direction of growth is around the clock counterclockwise. So we have a counterclockwise, what we call a right-hand turn. And that turn is called the Z-turn. This turns out to be the more common of ways that plants trellis and climb in subtropical areas.
All right, now let's talk about sort of the one of the issues with wisteria, despite it being so beautiful and attractive, is that it obviously grows like crazy. And the Chinese climate is sort of similar to some of our southeastern climate, so it can get really out of control and take over. So, what are the conditions it likes the best or the least?
Okay. I recommend the Japanese wisteria slightly better than the Chinese wisteria. And of course, if you can get an American wisteria, you can grow that. They're not actually from Tennessee. They're a little bit further south and richer lands. They have in common with the Japanese wisteria that you need a wet spot to grow them. And this hill was an old spring. And as a result, it grows on top of probably what was a well that someone used, and it's always happy. The Chinese wisteria is a lot more drought tolerant. And for that reason, it'll grow almost anywhere and can get pretty invasive. Why? Because both Japanese and Chinese wisteria will grow to your 200-foot side to side, and which is amazing. They'll sucker along the way and root along the way, but they'll also grow about 40 feet high, and so on some trees they'll choke the tree. But they prefer some trees versus other trees.
Well, you know, the benefit of having these really old properties is seeing a lot of these plants that have come over that we've been able to enjoy through the years. And the other benefit now is that we're learning more and more about things like the wonderful American wisteria, which you can duplicate these kind of conditions with something that we now know might be environmentally better placed in your area. So every spring, enjoy the spring and take a look around you, because you never know what you're going to find that might bloom just for a few days. Well, thank you so much for watching. And if you liked this video, you're going to love everything else that we have in our archives and running currently. In fact, you're going to see home tours, you're going to see specialty gardens, you're going to learn tips that will just blow you away as you end up with a better garden because of it. So please go to our channel, click subscribe, and continue watching. See you next time.